Lisa Martinez stared out the thick glass window at the endless stars beyond. The training station called Nexus was bigger than any city she had ever seen on Earth. Ships came and went like metal birds, carrying alien soldiers from worlds she could barely imagine. She pressed her hand against the cold glass and wondered what her grandmother would think if she could see her now. "Look at the tiny human," came a deep voice behind her. Lisa turned to see 3 reptilian creatures walking past. Their scales gleamed green and black under the station lights, and each one stood nearly 8 feet tall. The Draknari were the best fighters in the galaxy, or so they kept telling everyone. The largest one, Commander Zethrak, stopped and looked down at Lisa. His yellow eyes were like a snake's, cold and calculating. "I still cannot understand why the soft skins were allowed into our program. What can something so small and weak possibly offer?" Lisa kept her face calm, even though her heart was beating fast. She had heard worse back home in Montana. Ranch work taught you to deal with bullies, whether they had 2 legs or 4. "I'm here to learn, sir, just like everyone else." Zethrak made a sound that might have been laughter. "Learn. Child, you will be lucky to survive the first week. Your kind breaks too easily." The other Draknari joined in their commander's amusement. One pointed at Lisa's arms. "Look how thin, I could snap her bones with one hand." "Perhaps we should test that," said the third, flexing claws that could cut through steel. "That's enough." Jake Sullivan appeared beside Lisa, his broad shoulders tense. The former Marine from Texas was one of only 3 humans in the entire program. His jaw was set in the stubborn way Lisa had learned to recognize. "Pick on someone your own size." The human male thinks he can protect his female," Zethrak said. "How quaint. Very well, human. Show me what your species can do." Before Jake could respond, Amy Carter hurried over with her arms full of data tablets. The small woman from California looked nervous, her glasses sliding down her nose. "Jake, don't. The combat trials aren't until next week. We need to focus on the theory classes first." "Listen to the smart one," advised Zethrak. "She at least understands her limitations." He looked at all 3 humans with obvious disgust. 17 different species have sent their best warriors to this station. Each brings something special. The Vex High are faster than light itself. The Etherians can read minds and move objects with thought alone. The Arachnoids can climb any surface, and their venom can drop a charging rhino. He leaned down until his massive head was level with Lisa's. She could smell something like sulfur on his breath. "And what do humans bring? Soft skin that tears, weak bones that break. No claws, no venom, no special powers. You are prey animals pretending to be predators." Lisa met his yellow gaze without flinching. "We bring what we always have, the will to keep going when everything else gives up." For a moment, something flickered in the commander's eyes. Then he straightened and walked away, his companions following. Their heavy footsteps echoed down the metal corridor. "You okay?" Jake asked quietly. Lisa nodded, though her hands were shaking slightly. "Just another day in paradise." Amy pushed her glasses up. "I've been running calculations on the physical requirements for graduation. If we work together and cover each other's weak points, we might have a chance." "Might have a chance," Jake repeated. "That's encouraging." They walked together toward the training center, passing groups of alien recruits who stopped their conversations to stare. Lisa tried to ignore the pointing and whispering. Near the weapons range, she saw the Arachnoid twins click and clack, hanging upside down from the ceiling. Their 8 eyes focused on her, and they began making clicking sounds that sounded like laughter. "Soft skin," clicked Click in his mechanical voice. "Falls down, goes splat." "Splat, splat," agreed Clack, rubbing his front legs together in glee. The weapon training was worse than Lisa had expected. The standard pulse rifle was designed for beings much larger than humans. Even Jake, who was strong for their species, struggled to hold it steady. Lisa could barely lift hers without both hands. Instructor Velkan, a tall insect-like being with 4 arms, watched them with compound eyes that showed no emotion. "Pathetic. The Draknari child can fire this weapon with one hand while running. The Etherean can guide the shots with their mind. And you humans, you cannot even hold it properly. Lisa's rifle slipped again, the metal too large for her grip. Around the range, other recruits were hitting targets with ease. A young Draknari named Korath was putting holes through the center ring faster than Lisa could even aim. Perhaps, suggested Velkan, the humans should be assigned to kitchen duty instead of combat training. More clicking laughter from the arachnoids. Even some of the usually quiet Ethereans were sending amused thoughts that Lisa could almost hear at the edge of her mind. After weapons training came physical conditioning. Lisa ran on a treadmill next to beings who could move like lightning. She lifted weights that others treated as warm-up exercises. Every muscle in her body ached, but she kept going. Jake was doing better in the strength tests, but Amy was struggling, even more than Lisa. "Look at them," she heard one of the HFY whisper to another. "They move like they are stuck in mud." "Why does the Corps waste resources on such weakness?" replied his companion. During the midday meal, Lisa sat with Jake and Amy at a table by themselves. The cafeteria was full of different species eating different foods, but all of them seemed to have one thing in common. They thought humans didn't belong here. "Maybe they're right," Amy said quietly, poking at her nutrition paste. "I've run the numbers a dozen times. We're outclassed in every category." "Numbers don't tell the whole story," Lisa replied. "Back home I saw plenty of animals that looked stronger than humans. Bears, mountain lions, wolves. But humans survived when others didn't." "This isn't Earth," Jake pointed out. "These aren't wild animals. These are advanced beings with technology and training we can barely understand." Lisa looked around the cafeteria at all the different species. They were impressive, each in their own way, but there was something else she noticed. They mostly stayed with their own kind. Draknari sat with Draknari, HFY with HFY, each group isolated from the others. "Maybe," she said slowly, "being different isn't always a weakness." That afternoon brought their first glimpse of why the training was so important. They were taken to the lower levels of the station, where thick blast doors led to the containment areas. Through reinforced windows, they could see creatures that made nightmares seem pleasant. "These are the apex predators," announced their guide, Subcommander Kreksoth, a scarred Draknari veteran. "Captured from death worlds across the galaxy, they serve as both training tools and living weapons in our most desperate battles." Lisa pressed close to the window of the first cell. Inside was something that looked like a massive armored rhinoceros, but with too many horns and eyes that glowed red in the darkness. It was called Rex, and the information display said it had killed 6 handlers during capture. The next cell held something even worse. Whisper was a shadow made flesh, a feline predator that seemed to fade in and out of sight. Its file listed 12 confirmed kills among the research staff, but the final cell made Lisa's blood turn cold. Fenris was enormous, a wolf-like beast with midnight black fur and burning coal eyes. 8 feet tall at the shoulder, with scars covering his hide like a map of old battles. His file was longer than the others combined. 17 handlers dead, classified as completely untamable. "Beautiful, isn't he?" Kreksoth said with pride. "Captured on Grimholt Prime at the cost of an entire platoon. No being in the galaxy has been able to control him. We use him only for the most advanced training scenarios, when we need to simulate true terror." Fenris looked up at that moment, his burning eyes meeting Lisa's through the thick glass. For a heartbeat, she felt something pass between them. Not fear, but recognition. Like looking at another creature that had been underestimated its entire life. "Tomorrow," announced Kreksoth, "you begin your solo navigation exercises. You will traverse the lower levels of the station alone, testing your ability to survive in unfamiliar territory. Many of you will fail. Some of you may not return at all." He looked directly at the 3 humans. "I suggest you make peace with whatever gods you worship." As they returned to their quarters, Lisa could hear the other recruits already placing bets on which humans would wash out first. Most of the money was on her. She was the smallest, the weakest, the most obviously out of place. But as she lay in her narrow bunk that night staring at the metal ceiling, Lisa thought about Fenris, about the intelligence she had seen in those burning eyes, about the scars that told stories of survival against impossible odds. Maybe being underestimated wasn't always a bad thing. Maybe it meant people weren't watching when you figured out how to win. The alarm started at 600 hours, sharp and painful in the metal corridors of Nexus Station. Lisa rolled out of her bunk and grabbed her gear. Today was the solo navigation exercise, and her stomach felt like it was full of rocks. Jake was all ready, dressed, checking his equipment one more time. "Remember what we talked about," he said quietly. "Stay calm, follow the markers, and don't try to be a hero." Amy looked up from her data pad, her face pale. "I've mapped out 3 different routes through the lower levels. The shortest one takes you near the restricted zones, but it saves 20 minutes. I'll stick to the main corridors," Lisa said, clipping her emergency beacon to her belt. The small device would call for help if she got into real trouble, but using it meant automatic failure of the exercise. Sub-Commander Krexoth stood before the assembled recruits in the briefing room. His scarred hide looked even more intimidating in the harsh morning light. "Your task is simple," he announced. "Navigate from Point Alpha in the lower levels to Point Omega in the upper training sector. You have 4 hours. You will travel alone. Any recruit who uses their emergency beacon or requires rescue will be immediately removed from the program." Hugh looked directly at the 3 humans. "Some of you should consider using that beacon early. It might save your lives." The Draknari recruits chuckled. Korath, the young warrior who had shown off at the weapons range, flexed his claws. "Perhaps we should carry the soft skins to safety," he said loudly. "Like carrying sick younglings." More laughter from the alien recruits. Lisa kept her face blank, but inside, she was burning. She would show them what humans could do. One by one, the recruits were sent to different starting points. Lisa watched as Korath strutted toward his assignment, his tail swishing with confidence. The Vexhai recruits moved like liquid shadow, already planning their rapid routes through the station. Even Amy looked determined as she headed toward her starting point, data pad in hand. "Martinez," called Krexoth, "you draw level 7, section C. That's the old maintenance area near the power core." Lisa's heart sank. Level 7 was deep in the station's belly, where the corridors were narrow and the lighting was poor. It was also uncomfortably close to the containment areas where the apex predators were held. She made her way down through the levels, each one darker and more cramped than the last. By level 5, she was mostly alone. The main corridors were built for the larger alien species, and she felt like a child walking through a giant's house. Level 7 was worse. The ceiling was lower here, just tall enough for someone Lisa's size but cramped for most aliens. The air recycling systems hummed and wheezed, and she could hear the distant rumble of the station's power core. Her footsteps echoed strangely in the metal passages. She had been walking for an hour when she heard the first alarm. It started as a low warble, different from the morning wake-up call. Then it became urgent, shrieking through the corridors like a wounded animal. Emergency lights began flashing red, turning the narrow passages into a nightmare of shadows and blood-colored light. A computerized voice echoed through the station. "Containment breach in Section D. All personnel evacuate to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, containment breach in Section D." Lisa's blood turned to ice water. Section D was right, next to where she was walking. The containment area, where they kept the apex predators. She pressed herself against the wall as the station shuddered around her. Something big was moving in the levels below, and she could hear the distant sound of metal being torn apart. Emergency teams were shouting orders somewhere above her, but they sounded very far away. Her emergency beacon felt heavy on her belt. One push and rescue teams would come for her. One push and she would be safe in an evacuation shelter. One push and she would be out of the program forever. Lisa kept walking toward her target point. The corridors grew darker as she moved deeper into the maintenance section. Emergency power had kicked in, but half the lights were broken or missing. She used the small flashlight on her belt to navigate, the thin beam cutting through shadows that seemed to move on their own. Then she heard breathing that wasn't hers. It was deep and slow, like a sleeping giant, but there was something else in it, something that made the hair on her arms stand up. It was the sound of a predator, and it was very close. Lisa stopped, walking, and listened. The breathing was coming from ahead of her, from the direction she needed to go. She could turn back, find another route, maybe use her beacon and hope the rescue teams could reach her in time. But all those options meant giving up. She moved forward step by careful step. The corridor opened into a wider maintenance area, filled with pipes and machinery. Her flashlight beam swept across the room and caught something that made her heart stop. Eyes. Burning coal eyes that reflected her light like mirrors. Fenris stood in the center of the room, 8 feet of midnight black, fur and muscle. His massive head turned toward her, and she could see his teeth gleaming white in the darkness. The wolf beast from Grimholt Prime, the creature that had killed 17 handlers, was standing between her and the only way forward. Lisa's hand moved toward her emergency beacon, then stopped. Something about Fenris made her pause. He was watching her, but he hadn't attacked. His ears were forward, alert, but not flattened in anger. His tail wasn't raised in threat. She had grown up on a ranch in Montana. She knew animals, even if this one was from another world. And what she saw in Fenris wasn't mindless aggression. It was exhaustion, fear, pain. Slowly, very slowly, Lisa sat down on the metal floor. She made herself as small as possible, no bigger than a child. She put her flashlight down beside her, still pointing toward Fenris, but not directly at his eyes. "Hey there, big guy," she said softly. Her voice echoed strangely in the metal room. "You're scared too, aren't you?" Fenris tilted his massive head, studying her. His burning eyes seemed puzzled by this tiny creature that wasn't running or screaming. Lisa had seen that look before, in the eyes of spooked horses during thunderstorms, in injured cattle that needed help but were too afraid to accept it, in her grandmother's old dog Max when he was dying but still trying to protect the family. "It's okay," she whispered. "I know what it's like to be far from home, to have everyone expect you to be something you're not." She began to hum very quietly. It was an old song her grandmother had taught her, something about finding your way, home through dark woods. She had hummed it to frightened animals on the ranch, and it had always seemed to help. Fenris took a step closer, then another. His huge paws made no sound on the metal floor, but Lisa could feel the vibration through the deck plates. He was close enough now that she could smell him, something like pine trees in winter snow. The great wolf stopped just out of arm's reach and sat down, his massive form still towering over her even while sitting. His head tilted again, listening to her quiet humming. Lisa noticed the scars on his hide, old wounds that spoke of battles and pain. She saw how he favored his left rear leg, probably an injury that had never healed properly. Most of all, she saw the exhaustion in those burning eyes. This wasn't a monster. This was a creature that had been fighting his whole life and was tired of it. "You don't want to hurt anyone," she said softly. "You just want to go home." Fenris whined, a sound so soft she almost missed it. It was the sound of loneliness, of a creature that had forgotten what kindness felt like. Lisa slowly extended her hand, palm up, the way she had been taught to approach strange dogs. "It's okay, boy. I won't hurt you." The station shuddered again as security teams moved through. The upper levels, hunting for the escaped predators. Shouts and weapon fire echoed from somewhere far above. But in this small maintenance room, there was only quiet breathing and the soft sound of Lisa's humming. Fenris leaned forward and sniffed her hand. His nose was cold and wet, just like any dog from Earth. Then, incredibly, impossibly, he lay, down beside her. His massive head came to rest near her lap, and she could feel the warmth radiating from his fur. "There's a good boy," Lisa whispered, reaching out to gently scratch behind his ears. The fur was softer than she had expected, and Fenris made a sound that was almost like purring. They sat together in the darkness, the tiny human and the giant, wolf from a nightmare world, while the station continued to shake around them. Lisa kept humming and gently stroking Fenris's massive head, and for the first time since his capture, the great predator's eyes began to close in something like peace. That was how the security team found them 20 minutes later. 4 heavily armed Draknari warriors came around the corner expecting to find a bloody mess, and instead discovered Lisa sitting calmly on the floor with the galaxy's most dangerous predator resting beside her like an oversized pet. The lead warrior raised his weapon, but Lisa held up her hand. "Don't," she said quietly. "He's not hurting anyone." Commander Zethrak himself appeared behind the security team, his yellow eyes wide with disbelief. He stared at the scene for a long moment, then slowly lowered his weapon. "Impossible," he whispered. "No one has ever... How did you..." Lisa looked up at him, still gently stroking Fenris's head. "I listened," she said simply. "Sometimes that's all anyone needs." The news spread through Nexus Station like wildfire. The tiny human who everyone had expected to wash out in the first week had done something that experienced beast handlers said couldn't be done. She had tamed the untamable Fenris with nothing but kindness and understanding. But Lisa knew she hadn't tamed anything. She had simply recognized a kindred spirit, another creature that had been underestimated and pushed aside. As the security team carefully led Fenris back to a new, more comfortable containment area, the great wolf looked back at her once with something like gratitude in his burning eyes. For the first time since arriving at Nexus Station, Lisa smiled. The cafeteria went silent when Lisa walked in for breakfast. Every alien face turned to stare at her, and the usual chatter died away like someone had turned off a switch. She picked up her tray and walked to the food line, trying to ignore the whispers that started behind her. "That's her," she heard a Vexhai say to his companion. "The one who touched the death wolf." "Impossible," replied another voice. "No being can survive contact with Fenris. The reports must be wrong." Jake and Amy were already sitting at their usual table by the window. Jake looked proud but worried, while Amy was reading data files on her tablet with intense focus. "How are you holding up?" Jake asked as Lisa sat down with her breakfast. "Like I'm in a zoo," Lisa replied, noticing how the other recruits kept looking at her. "Everyone acts like I grew a second head." Amy looked up from her tablet. "I've been reading everything I can find about apex predators. What you did yesterday goes against every scientific study they have. Fenris was classified as completely hostile to all forms of life." "He wasn't hostile," Lisa said quietly. "He was scared and tired. There's a difference." "The Draknari don't see a difference," Jake pointed out. He nodded toward the far end of the cafeteria where Commander Zethrak sat with his warriors. The massive reptilian was watching Lisa with an expression she couldn't read. After breakfast, Lisa was called to the medical bay. Dr. Veltar, the station's chief scientist, was waiting for her. The tall, crystal-like being from Prism had skin that seemed to glow with inner light, and her movements were graceful like flowing water. "I must run tests," Dr. Veltar said in her musical voice. "What you accomplished yesterday should not be possible. I need to understand how." Lisa sat still while machines scanned her brain and body. Dr. Veltar asked hundreds of questions about her childhood, her family, and how she had learned to work with animals. "Fascinating," the doctor murmured, studying the results. "Your neural patterns show unusual activity in the areas associated with empathy and social bonding. It appears humans have evolved enhanced emotional intelligence as a survival trait." "What does that mean?" Lisa asked. "It means your species developed something unique. While others became stronger or faster or gained special powers, humans became better at understanding and connecting with other minds, even alien minds." That afternoon, Sub-Commander Krexoth came to find Lisa during training. The scarred Draknari looked uncomfortable, like he was doing something he didn't want to do. "The station commander wants to see you work with Fenris again," he said. "There are questions about what happened. Some believe it was luck or accident." Lisa followed him down to the containment levels. This time they had moved Fenris to a larger cell with better lighting and more comfortable conditions. The great wolf was lying on a soft platform instead of the cold metal floor. and Lisa could see fresh water and proper food in his area. A group of observers waited outside the cell, including Commander Zethrak and several other high-ranking officers. Dr. Veltar was there too, along with alien scientists Lisa didn't recognize. "Show them," Krexoth said simply. Lisa approached the cell door. Fenris was already on his feet, his burning eyes focused on her. When the door opened, he padded forward without any sign of aggression. "Hello, boy," Lisa said softly, extending her hand. Fenris nuzzled her palm, then sat beside her when she settled on the floor of his cell. The observers murmured among themselves. One of the scientists, a many-armed creature from the tentacled worlds, chittered in disbelief. "How is this possible? We have used every method known to science to control these beasts." "Perhaps," Dr. Veltar said thoughtfully, "you have been using the wrong methods." Over the following days, Lisa found herself spending more time in the containment areas. The station commanders wanted her to try working with other apex predators, to see if her success with Fenris was something that could be repeated. Rex, the massive armored creature from Bastion, had been a problem since his capture. The rhino-like beast charged at anyone who entered his cell, using his horn-covered head like a battering ram. Previous handlers had tried to control him with electric prods and sonic weapons. Lisa sat outside his cell for an hour, just watching. Rex paced back and forth, clearly agitated, but she noticed something others had missed. He always paused at the same spot, looking toward a corner of his cell where the lighting was dimmer. "He doesn't like the bright lights," she told Dr. Veltar. "Look at his eyes. They're built for low-light conditions. These floodlights probably hurt him." They dimmed the lighting in Rex's cell. Within minutes, the great beast became calmer. When Lisa finally entered his cell, Rex watched her carefully but didn't charge. She moved slowly, talking in quiet tones, and eventually Rex allowed her to approach. "Incredible," Dr. Veltar recorded in her notes. "The human identified the source of the creature's distress within hours, when our team spent months trying to subdue him through force." Whisper, the shadow cat from the Dark Worlds, presented a different challenge. The feline predator could fade in and out of sight, becoming nearly invisible. Several handlers had been killed because they couldn't see the creature until it was too late. But Lisa remembered her grandmother's old barn cat, Shadow, who used to hide in dark corners and pounce on unsuspecting mice. Cats were cats, even alien ones. She entered Whisper's cell with a small toy made from a piece of string and a metal bolt. She dragged it across the floor, making it dance and skitter like prey. Within minutes, Whisper materialized from the shadows, his hunting instincts engaged by the moving target. Soon, the massive predator was playing like a kitten, pouncing on the simple toy while Lisa laughed at his antics. The observers watching through the viewing window could hardly believe what they were seeing. "The death cat is playing?" stammered one of the arachnoid scientists. "This goes against everything we know about their behavior." Not everyone was pleased with Lisa's success. A group of traditionalist instructors, led by Sub-Commander Krexoth, met in private to discuss what they saw as a dangerous development. "This human approach is making our warriors soft," Krexoth argued. "We have always controlled these beasts through strength and discipline. If we start coddling them like pets, we undermine the entire military structure." "The creatures respond to her methods," pointed out another instructor. "Results matter more than tradition." "Results?" Krexoth's voice was sharp with anger. "What happens when these spoiled beasts turn on their handlers? What happens in real combat when gentle words are not enough?" The debate continued, but Lisa was unaware of the growing opposition to her methods. She was too busy working with Jake and Amy on their own improvements. Jake had started applying Lisa's approach to his tactical training. Instead of trying to dominate his assigned war beast through intimidation, he treated the creature like a fellow soldier. The results were impressive. His armored slug beast, normally sluggish and uncooperative, began responding to commands with military precision. Amy used her engineering skills to develop better communication systems between handlers and their assigned creatures. Her energy-based partner, a being of living electricity, had been nearly impossible to work with until Amy created a harmonic interface that let them understand each other's intentions. The three humans were becoming more than just survivors in the program. They were innovators, showing new ways to achieve old goals. Dr. Veltar published her preliminary findings about human neural patterns. The report suggested that humanity's greatest evolutionary advantage wasn't physical strength or special powers, but their ability to form emotional bonds across species barriers. Other races developed in isolation, her report concluded. Humans evolved on a world with millions of different species. They learned to read emotional states in creatures vastly different from themselves. This may be why they can succeed where others fail. The report caused debate throughout the Galactic Defense Corps. Some commanders saw the potential in human methods. Others worried about changing traditions that had worked for thousands of years. Commander Zethrak found himself in an uncomfortable position. His entire worldview was built on the idea that strength and dominance were the keys to success. But he couldn't argue with results. Lisa and her friends were not just surviving the program, they were excelling in ways no one had expected. The final test was approaching. The crucible would determine which recruits graduated and which ones were sent home in failure. Traditionally, it was a test of individual strength and skill, pitting each recruit against impossible odds with minimal support. But this year, the test coordinators made a change. For the first time, recruits would be paired with apex predators for the trial. The announcement sent shockwaves through the training program. "This is madness," Korath said loudly in the common area. "We are warriors, not animal handlers. How can we be expected to fight alongside beasts?" The Vex High recruits were equally concerned. Their speed and agility meant nothing if they had to coordinate with creatures that moved differently than they did. Only the humans seemed calm about the news. Lisa was actually looking forward to working with Fenris in a real test situation. Jake and Amy were confident that their new approaches would give them an advantage. "Let them worry," Jake said quietly, as they prepared for bed. "We've been training for this without knowing it." But Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The traditionalist instructors had been too quiet lately, and she had caught them watching her with expressions that made her uncomfortable. As she lay in her bunk that night, staring at the metal ceiling, Lisa thought about everything that had changed since her encounter with Fenris. She had proven that humans could succeed in ways no one expected. But she was beginning to understand that success sometimes made enemies out of people who preferred the old ways. The crucible would test more than her ability to work with apex predators. It would determine whether the galaxy was ready to accept that sometimes the smallest voice could speak the loudest truth. Outside her window, the stars wheeled in their endless dance, and somewhere in the depths of the station, Fenris waited for the morning that would change everything. The crucible chamber was the size of 10 football fields, its walls covered in holographic projectors that could create any environment the instructors wanted. Today, those walls showed the hellish landscape of Zarian 7th, where twisted metal spires reached toward a blood-red sky and the ground was littered with the wreckage of 1,000 battles. Lisa stood with the other recruits at the starting line, her heart beating fast, but her hands steady. Around her, alien warriors prepared for the final test that would determine their futures. Some would graduate today. Others would go home in failure. A few might not go home at all. "This simulation recreates the Battle of Zarian 7th, announced the chief instructor through the chamber's speakers. "Your mission is to destroy the Void Collective Harvester at the center of the battlefield. You will work with your assigned apex predators to complete this task. Failure means death. Even in simulation, the safety protocols have been reduced to make this as real as possible." Lisa looked around at the other recruits. Korath, the young Draknari warrior, was paired with a smaller fire lizard that kept trying to bite him. The Vex High twins had been given swift hunting cats that clearly wanted to go in different directions. Even the confident Etherians looked nervous about working with creatures their mental powers couldn't fully control. Sub-Commander Krexoth appeared beside the human recruits, a cold smile on his scarred face. "Special assignments for our human friends," he said. "Martinez, you will work with not one but 3 apex predators, Fenris, Rex, and Whisper. Surely someone with your talents can handle such a simple task." Lisa felt her stomach drop. 1 apex predator was challenging for experienced warriors. 3 was meant to be impossible. She could see the trap clearly now. The traditionalists wanted her to fail spectacularly, proving that human methods were worthless when it really mattered. That's not fair. Jake started to protest, but Lisa put a hand on his arm. It's okay, she said quietly. I can do this. Krexoth's smile widened. Excellent. Sullivan, you'll work with the Ironback Grizzly. Carter, you get the Storm Dancer. I'm sure you'll all do your best. The chamber filled with mist as the holographic environment activated. When it cleared, Lisa found herself standing in a nightmare landscape of twisted metal and smoking craters. The air smelled of sulfur and burned metal, and the ground shook with distant explosions. 3 shapes emerged from the mist around her. Fenris padded forward first, his burning eyes alert and focused. Rex lumbered behind him, his armored hide gleaming in the red light. Whisper seemed to flow like liquid shadow, barely visible even when Lisa was looking directly at him. Hey boys, Lisa said softly, trying to keep her voice calm despite the chaos around them. Ready to show everyone what we can do? Fenris moved. To her left side, Rex to her right, and Whisper disappeared into the shadows behind her. They moved forward as a unit, picking their way through the debris of the simulated battlefield. Around them, Lisa could hear the other recruits struggling with their assignments. Someone screamed as their creature turned on them. Weapons fire echoed from multiple directions, along with roars and howls that spoke of panic and confusion. The Void Collective Harvester loomed ahead of them, a massive machine the size of a building. Its surface bristled with weapons and sensors, and smaller robots crawled over its hull like mechanical ants. The simulation had made it as accurate as possible to the real machines that had devastated entire star systems. Lisa crouched behind a pile of wreckage and studied the target. The Harvester's weapons were tracking the other recruits, laying down fields of fire that made direct assault impossible. But she noticed something the others had missed. The machine's sensors were focused, outward, looking for large threats. They might not notice something small moving underneath. Whisper, she whispered, knowing the Shadow Cat could hear her even if she couldn't see him. Can you get under that thing? Find weak spots? A soft purr from somewhere behind her confirmed that Whisper understood. The Shadow Cat faded from sight completely, becoming invisible as he slipped through the debris toward the Harvester. Meanwhile, the other recruits were failing one by one. Korath tried to charge the machine head-on, but his fire lizard panicked and fled, leaving him exposed to the Harvester's guns. The simulation killed him instantly, teleporting him out of the chamber in a flash of red light. The Vexhide twins couldn't coordinate their hunting cats, and both creatures ran in different directions. Without their predator partners, the swift aliens were easy targets for the machine's tracking systems. Even some of the traditionally powerful species were struggling. The Etherians found that their mental abilities had little effect on mechanical. Targets and their assigned creatures were too alien for easy psychic control. Jake was doing better. His Ironback Grizzly was slow but steady, and he had learned to work with the creature's natural instincts instead of fighting them. They made progress toward the Harvester's flank, but the machine's defensive fire kept forcing them back. Amy had taken a different approach entirely. Her Storm Dancer was a creature of living electricity, and she had used her engineering knowledge to create a feedback loop that let them communicate directly. They were trying to overload the Harvester's power systems, but it was slow work. Whispers, purr echoed from underneath the Harvester, confirming that he had found something important. Lisa turned to Fenris and Rex, both creatures watching her intently. Here's the plan, she said quietly. Rex, I need you to draw their fire. Charge the front and make as much noise as possible. Fenris and I will go around the side while they're distracted. Rex rumbled deep in his throat, a sound that might have been agreement. The massive creature lowered his head and began building speed, his armored form moving like a living tank toward the Harvester's main guns. The machine immediately focused all its weapons on Rex, recognizing him as the biggest threat. Plasma, bolts and laser beams lit up the air around the charging predator, but his armor held against everything the Harvester could throw at him. Lisa and Fenris sprinted along the machine's flank, using the distraction to get close to its base. The great wolf moved like flowing shadow, his paws silent on the broken ground. They reached the harvester's side just as Whisper reappeared from underneath. The Shadow Cat had found what Lisa hoped for. The machine's main power coupling was exposed. On its underside, protected only by light armor. It was a small target, too small for the harvester's main weapons to defend. "Fenris, boost me up," Lisa said, pointing to a maintenance ladder that ran up the machine's side. The great wolf crouched down, and Lisa used his back to jump higher than any human should have been able to reach. She caught the ladder and began climbing while Fenris and Whisper guarded the base. The harvester's smaller defensive weapons tried to track her, but she was too small and moving too fast. She reached the power coupling just as the machine began to turn its main guns away from Rex to deal with this new threat. Lisa pulled out the small explosive charge that was part of every recruit's standard equipment. She armed it and placed it directly on the power coupling, then slid back down the ladder faster than was probably safe. "Everyone back," she shouted. Rex broke off his charge and rumbled back toward their position. Fenris grabbed Lisa's jacket in his teeth and half-carried, half-dragged her away from the harvester. Whisper was already fading into the shadows. The explosion when it came was spectacular. The harvester's power systems overloaded in a cascade failure that lit up the entire chamber. The massive machine toppled sideways, crushing several of its own defensive robots under its weight. Silence fell over the battlefield simulation. Then the chamber's speakers crackled to life. "Exercise complete. Martinez's team achieves primary objective. All other teams terminated." The holographic environment faded away, leaving Lisa standing in the empty chamber with her 3 predator partners. Around the edges of the room, the surviving recruits stared at her in amazement. Most of the others had been eliminated early in the exercise. Commander Zethrak entered the chamber, his expression unreadable. Behind him came Dr. Veltar and the other senior instructors, including a very unhappy-looking Sub-Commander Krexoth. "In 30 years of conducting the Crucible," Zethrak said slowly, "no recruit has ever achieved complete mission success while working with 3 apex predators. Most can barely handle one." He walked over to where Lisa stood with Fenris, Rex, and Whisper. The 3 creatures watched him calmly, showing none of their previous hostility toward other beings. "You have done something I thought impossible," the commander continued. "You have turned weapons into partners, monsters into allies." He looked at each of the predators in turn, then back at Lisa. "I owe you an apology. I was wrong about humans. About you." Jake and Amy had also passed their trials, though with less spectacular results. Jake's steady approach with his iron-back grizzly had earned him a solid score, while Amy's technical innovation with her storm dancer impressed the engineering instructors. The graduation ceremony was held that evening. Lisa stood with her fellow humans as Commander Zethrak presented them with the insignia of the Galactic Defense Corps. But the real surprise came when he announced the formation of a new unit. "The Corps has decided to create the Apex Squadron," he said. "A special unit that pairs human coordinators with teams of Apex Predators for the most dangerous missions. Martinez will lead this unit, with Sullivan and Carter as her primary support team." Sub-Commander Krexoth stepped forward, his face hard with anger. "This is a mistake. Combat requires discipline and strength, not sentiment and weakness." "You call the results we saw today weakness?" Zethrak asked. "Martinez accomplished, in hours, what our best warriors could not do in years. She turned the untamable into the unstoppable." As the ceremony concluded, Lisa found herself on the observation deck of her new ship, the GDC Harmony. It was smaller than the main battle cruisers, but built specifically for her team's unique requirements. Special quarters for the Apex Predators, advanced communication systems and equipment designed for cooperative rather than dominating approaches. Fenris padded up beside her, his massive head coming to rest against her shoulder as they looked out at the stars. Rex settled nearby, his armor plating gleaming in the ship's lights. Whisper was somewhere in the shadows, present but invisible as always. Jake and Amy joined her at the viewing port, both wearing their new uniforms with obvious pride. "Think we can really make this work?" Amy asked, adjusting her glasses as she studied a datapad full of their first mission parameters. Look around, Lisa said, gesturing to the creatures that had once been considered monsters. We already have. The stars stretched endlessly before them, full of challenges and dangers that would test everything they had learned. But for the first time since joining the Galactic Defense Corps, Lisa felt truly confident about the future. The galaxy had spent thousands of years believing that strength came from domination and fear. But sometimes the greatest victories came not from breaking your enemies, but from understanding them. Not from standing alone, but from building bridges between different worlds and different minds. As the Harmony prepared to leave Nexus Station for their first mission, Lisa smiled and scratched behind Fenris's ears. The galaxy was about to learn what humans had always known, that compassion was not weakness, but the strongest force in the universe. Behind them, the training station grew smaller in the viewport, but the lessons learned there would echo across the stars for generations to come.